Scientists drained this lake and found something terrifying. Welcome back, Charlie here. Many of Earth's biggest mysteries are hidden underwater, from a lost city found under a lake, to a missing submarine finally found without its crew. First, we have to look at this giant skeleton. In 2017, researchers were roaming in the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. Their submarine camera was investigating the seabed, but that's when their camera captured the remains of a giant unidentified creature. These bones are absolutely colossal. It appeared to be some kind of serpent-like creature. The bones had clearly been there for some time. When the submarine's claw tried to pick up the bones, they disintegrated. But what on earth could this be? It did seem like the size of a whale, but no whale could have this anatomy, meaning these giant bones definitely do not belong to a whale. In fact, these may be the bones of an unidentified ancient creature. The skeleton had clay amphora sticking out of the mud, meaning this is likely proof of a gigantic ancient sea serpent. If you think sea creatures today are scary, I think the ones thousands of years ago were even more terrifying. Now I have to show you this lost Chinese city. Do you believe in Atlantis? That's the city which is apparently lost underwater. Well, it turns out the real-life Atlantis exists in China. This is Lion City. Divers found this lost city underneath Qiandao Lake. Lion City was inhabited for hundreds of years, but somehow made its way into this lake, where it was lost for hundreds more years. People had no idea this city was lost under this lake for centuries. It's one of the best preserved ancient Chinese cities. Homes, temples, and other buildings are still intact, making this an amazing cultural and historic find. The city dates back all the way to 621 AD. Lion City is also very big. It was found in 2014 and is still being explored and researched today. Next, let's look at this poisonous snake. One day a man was kayaking down a river. That's when he noticed something that made his heart drop. To you, this may look like any ordinary snake, but the man in the kayak, named the Bearded Biologist, knew exactly what this was. You are looking at a copperhead snake, coming right for this guy's kayak. Copperhead snakes are very venomous vipers. Bites can be deadly, and every year people lose their lives to copperhead snakes. Most people would have freaked out and paddled away, or even swatted the snake away using the paddle, but the Bearded Biologist keeps calm. He distracts the scary snake with his paddle, and then makes his way down the river. The venomous snake actually follows him for about 10 seconds, before losing interest and swimming away. Thankfully, this snake did not attack this man, but this snake could have easily caught up to him if it wanted to, making this one incredibly lucky near miss. Moving on, let's look at this missing submarine. In 2021, an Indonesian Navy submarine went missing. The submarine had 53 crew members on board. The Indonesian Navy began frantically searching for the submarine, and using another submarine eventually found it a few days later. The submarine was built in 3 parts, and these parts somehow separated. The submarine was found without its crew, but sadly it was confirmed all 53 people passed away. It was only carrying enough oxygen for 3 days, but it was missing for over 5 days. The submarine had sank incredibly far. It was resting at the ocean's floor, around 100 kilometers north of Bali. The Navy found the submarine using sonar. Sonar uses sound waves to locate objects underwater. A remote-operated submarine then took these photos and videos, confirming that it was in fact the missing submarine. Next, let's look at this gnome graveyard. Why are there hundreds of gnomes hidden under this lake? Under Wastwater Lake in England, you'll find these creepy garden gnomes. These gnomes have been here for years. Divers are often confused when seeing these in Wastwater Lake. It's England's deepest lake, at nearly 260 feet. But what are these gnomes doing here? Well, the gnomes are actually to help divers see. In the 1990s, 3 divers died in this lake. That's because they got disorientated and lost in the dark, muddy waters. So these gnomes were put here to help divers orientate themselves. I guess garden gnomes aren't completely useless after all. Now we have to look at this airplane. Divers were scared when they found this plane underwater in Jordan. The divers assumed a plane had crashed into the sea, but surprisingly this plane was actually sunk on purpose. In 2017, this old plane was sunk by the Jordanian government. This was to create an artificial reef, providing shelter and food for fish. This helps marine life to live and thrive. Thankfully, no one was inside the plane when it was sunk, but they did put one creepy skeleton in the cockpit. Definitely a scary shock for any unsuspecting divers. Now let's look at this alien jellyfish. What is this bizarre creature? That's what many were asking after this was found in the Indian Ocean. It has a circular body and a large tentacle. It kind of looks like a balloon floating in the wind. It was found 23,600 feet below sea level, and no one knows how it survives. This was found by the world's deepest diving submarine. Some believe the animal may use this large tentacle to eat, but this creature remains incredibly unexplained and mysterious to this day. Next, let's look at this giant sea creature. One day on a Mexican beach, a gigantic sea creature was found. It was over 10 feet in length. Tourists and locals were stunned, but I can tell you what this animal actually is. This massive animal is known as an oarfish. These are actually twice as aggressive as sharks, making it scary there's so many people standing around it. Everyone on the beach seems very scared, but surprisingly oarfish are rather common. But they're not normally this big. The largest oarfish ever caught was a massive 36 feet. Moving on, let's look at Canal Saint-Martin. Canal Saint-Martin can be found in Paris, France. But in 2016, this canal was drained by scientists. Under the water, they made some incredible discoveries. It turned out many people had been using this canal to cover up crimes. Scientists found pistols in the canal. They also found motorbikes, cars, and bicycles, wine bottles, supermarket carts, and fire extinguishers, and even someone's abandoned toilet. Finally, I have to show you this lost Egyptian city. In the year 2000, researchers found a lost city off the coast of Egypt. The city was named Heraklion. Many thought this city was simply a myth, but thousands of years after it sank, it was discovered once again. The city had many buildings and homes, all built around canals, kind of like an ancient Egyptian Venice. It was once a grand city, but today it sits off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt. The mysterious part is, no one knows how this massive city ended up underwater. Heraklion is still being explored and researched to this day, so if they ever find an answer, I'll be sure to let you guys know. Heraklion goes back to the 12th century BC, and at the time was a very powerful city. It had one of ancient Egypt's biggest ports, meaning it was a large hub for trade. Some experts believe other ancient Egyptian cities may be hiding underwater, which is why many researchers are now looking for these supposed lost cities. Other lost Egyptian cities include Akhutatan, Abydos, and Naucratis. Maybe in the not-so-far future, we'll find even more of these amazing lost cities underwater. You are looking at the scariest thing ever found underground. Welcome back, Charlie here. It's easy to forget there's so much beneath the ground we walk on every day. Well, here are some times terrifying and unexplained things have been discovered underground. From a secret city of people found underground in Russia, to a disturbing room found underneath a mafia boss's house. First, we have to look at giants. If I told you giants used to roam our Earth, you may not believe me, but check out this video and try to explain it. Scientists were digging in a village near Shandong province in China. That's when they stumbled across some massive bones. At first, they assumed these belonged to a massive animal, but they soon realized these were human bones. In fact, there was a whole group of these gigantic people buried underground. These people were more than a foot taller than anyone else living in the region at that time. Mysteriously, they all passed away and were buried together. These men would have been giants at the time. The skeletons were 5,000 years old. Back then, people were much shorter, and China is one of the shortest countries in the world. That makes these giant skeletons even more impressive and mysterious. Who were they? How did they die? And why were they all buried together? Moving on, we have to look at the sounds of hell. Ever wondered what hell sounds like? Well, some Soviet scientists actually found out. This is the Kola Super Deep borehole. It's 7.5 miles deep underground. It is the deepest hole ever dug. It can be found in the Kola Peninsula in Russia. Soviet scientists wanted to dig to the Earth's core. This hole is deeper than the Mariana Trench, that being the deepest part of our oceans. But they did not reach the Earth's core. After they broke through the Earth's crust, they had to abort the project. That's because it was so hot their equipment would simply melt, reaching temperatures of 356 degrees Fahrenheit. Scarily, the scientists captured one audio recording before their microphone melted. This is what it sounded like. Many say this is the closest sound we'll get to hell. The sounds were so scary, some of the scientists even quit. It honestly sounds like the screams of people burning in hell. Moving on, we have to look at cursed money. If you found some money buried underground, you'd probably think it was your lucky day. But after hearing about this case, you might think again. In 2011, Wayne Sabaj was gardening in his backyard. That's when he found a massive amount of cash in plastic bags buried in his backyard. In total, there was over $150,000 in the bags. Wayne was unemployed at the time and thought his luck had finally turned around. That was until his 87-year-old neighbor said the money belonged to her. The woman said she believed the cash was cursed and so she buried it. That may sound far-fetched, but here's where things get crazy. Eventually, Wayne was awarded the money by a court, but he died just 10 days before he was set to collect the money. Soon after, Wayne's father suffered a heart attack, and not long after that, Wayne's neighbor also passed away. If this money is cursed, it literally killed everyone involved in this story. Would you accept this cursed money? Maybe 150 grand is worth the risk. Moving on, we have to look at a very disturbing discovery made in Moscow, Russia. In 2013, a secret underground city was found underground. The city was actually a gigantic sweatshop. 260 people had been living in this sweatshop city. Most of them were from China and other Asian countries. The underground city was one big sweatshop. There were work tables everywhere, but there was also a cinema, a cafe, and even live chickens. The workers said they'd been kept underground in this city and weren't allowed to leave. They'd been working 12-hour days for 7 days a week, and were only paid $100 a week. To this day, it's not known who owned this sweatshop, but it's believed it was high-ranking members of the Russian mafia. Moving on, we have to look at a very scary discovery in Philadelphia, USA. Construction workers were demolishing a parking lot. That's when they found something that made their jaw drop. The workers were supposed to be building new apartments, but they had to delay this and excavate the land. This was after they found many caskets underground. They were shocked to find one, but then more and more kept being discovered. The caskets were over 300 years old and contained real human skeletons. An old burial ground used to be located here. All of the caskets were supposed to be relocated years ago. Whoever was in charge of this lied and said they'd moved the bodies, when in reality they simply kept them buried underground. They probably did this to cut costs. This means that for many years people had been parking their cars over dead bodies. Who knows what kind of curses these drivers may have got. Moving on, we have to look at a giant pit. Do you really know what goes on underneath your house? After watching this video, you may think again. A man named Craig Wilson was doing some home repairs. That's when he noticed a small hole. When he looked in a bit more, he was shocked. He found that underneath his house was a gigantic pit. The hole went down a full 16 feet, and could have been deadly if Craig fell in. The cavern could have even swallowed up Craig's house. To this day, it's unknown if this was man-made or natural. If Craig fell into this, he likely would never have got out. Moving on, we have to look at a garbage can found in a forest. One day, a YouTuber named Metal Detecting 24 was using his metal detector in a forest. That's when his device starts beeping. He moved some leaves and found some planks of wood, and underneath the planks of wood he found a metal trash can. It was buried underground and had clearly been there for many years. The man prepared for the worst and decided to open the lid. Inside, he found something incredibly eerie. There was the head of a female mannequin, and a blade was taped to the right side of her head. It may seem like a prank, but this was buried very well. So clearly whoever did this wanted to hide it. Some believe this may have been a killer practicing for the real deal. But to this day, this scary trash can remains unexplained. Metal Detecting 24 was very creeped out by this. He then quickly left the area. I'm not sure if he called police or not, but I honestly hope he did. This seriously seems like the kind of thing a serial killer might do for fun. It's a good thing whoever put this here wasn't lurking in the woods at the same time as this YouTuber. Moving on, we have to look at a rattlesnake nest. It's scary to come across one rattlesnake, but did you know that snakes live in large nests? One day a man named Michael Delaney was flying his drone. That's when he spots a snake in the brush. He follows its path and finds a big den of rattlesnakes. Michael looks at them with his drone up close, but that's when one of the rattlesnakes decide to strike. They launch up and hit Michael's drone out of the sky. Michael now realizes that he'll somehow have to recover the drone. That is, if he wants to see his drone again. Eventually, he grabs a hockey stick and is able to rescue the drone. Michael had to go very close to this rattlesnake nest to do this. If it was me, I'd think I'd simply abandon the drone. It's not worth getting bitten by a loose rattlesnake. Moving on, we have to look at a mafia house. A man named Charles is checking out a house for sale in Las Vegas. The house used to be owned by the mafia, but during the tour he finds a fake wall in the kitchen. He then finds a secret set of stairs which leads to a secret basement. The basement extends for a long time underground. That's until Charles gets to a white room with nothing in it. Connected to this room are two smaller rooms. The two smaller rooms are dark and soundproof, maybe to cover up screams. To make things even scarier, they only have doorknobs on the outside. That way anyone locked inside it can't get out. It's scary to think no one could escape from these soundproof rooms. And in another room is a single bullet casing, likely meaning someone was shot in that room. The house does look massive, but I'd be way too scared to live here. Just imagine what would happen if the mafia came back. Finally, we have to look at a bomb found buried underground. On Christmas morning, construction workers were digging in Augsburg, Germany. That's when they made a discovery that made them run for their lives. There was a massive unexploded bomb dating back to World War II. This had been buried underground somehow. It weighed 1.8 tons, and if their digging equipment hit the wrong place, it could have gone off. Authorities immediately evacuated the entire city. 54,000 people had to evacuate the city on Christmas. A bomb disposal unit then had to move the bomb far away, and then detonate it in a controlled manner. If it had exploded, then it would have covered a full mile in all directions. Here's what the blast radius would look like on a real map of the city. It sure is lucky these construction workers didn't accidentally set it off. Otherwise, thousands of lives could have been lost in an instant. There is something scary hiding in this swamp. Welcome back, Charlie here. Swamps can be rather yucky places, but as you'll soon see, they can also be very scary. From unexplained swamp discoveries to bizarre creatures found living inside swamps. First, we have to look at this swamp sinkhole. This video will be enough to make you never want to go near a swamp again. Many don't realize this, but you can easily lose your life in a swamp, especially if you get caught up in a swamp sinkhole. Take a look at this video from 2020. Two simultaneous swamp sinkholes opened up at once. This took place in Bomed County, Kenya. The swamp sinkhole swallowed up everything in sight. But what actually caused this? Well, it turned out limestone was below this swamp, and that limestone was rapidly eroding. As the limestone dissolved, the water kept getting deeper and deeper, creating a swirling sinkhole effect. If anyone was swimming in the swamp at the time, they would be sucked underneath, and likely would have not made it out alive. But thankfully in this case, no one was pulled underneath. Next, we have to look at this swamp monster. In 2021, some friends are rowing a small boat. They're making their way through a swamp at night. The water seems still and peaceful, but that's when one of the people on the boat puts their hand into the murky water. He quickly pulls it back out and says something grabbed him. The men are freaked out but assume it's some sort of fish. The men then see something glowing in the water. It looks like a creature with lights on it. Then after a few moments, this happens. It seems like some kind of blue hand emerges from the water. I've slowed down and enhanced this video so we can take a better look. The hand seems to have 5 fingers, but they're all the same length, meaning this is not a human. Some speculate this could be a cenophore of some kind. That's because cenophores have glowing lights, and right before this man, the men saw lights in the water. Others say this may be some kind of eel, but this video is over a year old and we still don't know what this is. Online, many said this was a real-life swamp monster, but what do you think this could be? Moving on, we have to look at these creepy dolls. In October of 2014, a police chief was driving next to a swamp. That's when he saw a sight that made his jaw drop. He saw what looked like porcelain dolls in the swamp. This was in Bear Creek Swamp in Alabama. The cop, Joe Sedinger, was creeped out but decided to drive on. But a few days later, he began receiving phone calls from creeped out locals. People kept reporting seeing scary figures in the swamp. So Joe and his other cops went to investigate. In the swamp, they found 21 very creepy porcelain dolls. These had been stuck onto bamboo stakes, and many of them had their faces removed. The police chief decided to post about this on social media. He asked if anyone had any information about these dolls, but no one ever came forward. Eventually, the case was closed, but it remains one of Alabama's creepiest unexplained mysteries. Moving on, we have to look at this plane. Believe it or not, this plane has a name. It's named Swamp Ghost. In 1942, the USA got involved in World War II. It began using heavy bomber planes. During this, one of their USB-17E bombers was shot with bullets, causing the plane to crash land into a swamp in Papua New Guinea. Miraculously, all 9 crew on board survived, but had to spend 6 weeks living in the swamp. They had to battle lack of food and water, as well as heat exhaustion and malaria. But after these 6 weeks, the 9 soldiers finally made it to safety. But their plane was lost for decades in the swamp. But 30 years later, Australian soldiers were flying overhead. They were flying over Papua New Guinea in a helicopter. That's when they saw something submerged in a swamp. When they landed to check it out, they realized it was a plane, and nicknamed it Swamp Ghost. The US Army then decided to retrieve the plane. It was very difficult because at this point the swamp had been infested with crocodiles. But amazingly, they got this old plane back to the USA, and it's now on display at a museum in Hawaii. Next, I have to show you this giant snake. In 2020, 2 men made a record-breaking discovery in a Florida swamp. They found an 18-foot Burmese python, the largest python ever found in the USA. In total, the snake was 18 feet and 9 inches. But how did a Burmese python even end up in Florida? You see, people used to keep these as pets, but over the years they escaped or were released on purpose. And over the last 15 years, the Burmese snake population has skyrocketed in Florida. They're now wild animals in the state, and snake catchers like these 2 guys make lots of money from catching them. They can make up to $150 per snake captured. That is, if you have the guts to do it. They document their snake captures on their channel, Snakeaholic. The massive python weighed 63.5 kilos, meaning these 2 men couldn't even hold it up. Burmese pythons are a deadly species, so these men were literally risking their lives. But I guess $150 is $150. Moving on, we have to look at these swamp creatures. In 2012, some people were walking near a swamp in Seney, France. That's when they saw these very creepy figures in the swamp. The creatures were thin and appeared to be frozen in time. It almost looked like they'd been covered in mud and clay. But what were these creatures? And what were they doing in a French swamp? Well, it turned out these were sculptures. They were apparently created to reflect man's complicated relationship with nature. The figures were made with iron, mud, and algae. They were then left to dry, making the mud look like skin. These creatures really are terrifying. Even if they're not living things, just imagine seeing one of these at night. Moving on, we have to look at this mysterious cemetery. In 1982, road workers stumbled across something scary in Utah, USA. While digging in a swamp, they found many skulls. At first, they thought it was a murder site, but experts found the skulls were not recent. After looking more, they discovered the remains of 168 people. Thanks to the swamp, the skulls had been well preserved. allowing experts to find out the skulls were from the Archaic period. That's around 500 BC. Moving on, we have to look at a tank. The tank was found in Estonia in the year 2000, and amazingly the tank still worked. 116 shells were even found inside. But there was one mystery about this tank. It was a T-34 Soviet tank, but for some reason it had German markings. It turned out the German army had stolen this from the Soviet army, and then used it as one of their own tanks for many years. That was before they got it stuck in a swamp. It's believed this was actually done on purpose. The Soviets were advancing into Estonia, so to make sure they couldn't take the tank back, the Germans drove it into a swamp on purpose. Basically saying, if I can't have it, no one can. Finally, we have to look at this swamp shipwreck. In Istanbul, Turkey, some archaeologists were exploring a swamp. That's when they found 37 shipwrecks. These were from the Byzantine Empire. These ships were thousands of years old, but were in relatively good condition. This definitely is a fascinating peek back into history. This secret door inside an Egyptian pyramid has just been opened. Welcome back, Charlie here. Egypt is full of mysteries that baffle experts even today. From lost cities we've only recently found, to coins that may be proof of alien life. These Egypt discoveries scared scientists. First, we have to look at this lost city finally found. You may think it's impossible for a whole city to become lost, but that's what happened to the city of Aten in Egypt. It was lost for over 3,000 years, but was recently found. This is one of the most important Egyptian discoveries of all time. To make things even more amazing, this city was found by accident. In September of 2020, a group of archaeologists were in Egypt. They were looking for a temple, but instead they stumbled across an entire lost city. The lost city is named Aten, also known as Egypt's Lost Golden City. This city was built at the peak of the Egyptian Empire, and shows us what life was like back in ancient Egypt. The city had well-preserved houses, workshops, and even government buildings. This city is from when Egypt was its most powerful, making this one of the most important historical discoveries of all time. Moving on, let's look at this scary spinning statue. This surveillance camera video comes from the British Museum. It shows an ancient Egyptian artifact moving all by itself, almost as if it's possessed in some way. Some believe this figurine was cursed by an Egyptian god. Museum staff were baffled as this statue would move all by itself. Some experts say that vibrations from people's footsteps could be causing the statue to move, but other statues next to this one don't appear to move at all. Do you think this statue really could be cursed by an Egyptian god? Or do you think there's another more scientific explanation? Moving on, we have to look at these mysterious black boxes. In Egypt, many of these strange black boxes have been found. They're made of solid granite, and each of these boxes weigh more than 100 tons. They were made with such precision it's considered mind-blowing even today. So far, 24 of these black boxes have been found, but how or why the ancient Egyptians made these is a mystery. They were mostly found on a hillside, 12 miles south of the Great Pyramid of Giza. These were cut so precisely it makes zero sense. Many experts say Egyptian technology could not have done this. Which begs the question, if not ancient Egyptians, who made these? But as of right now, it's one of Egypt's greatest mysteries. Moving on, we have to look at these alien coins. Are these ancient coins proof aliens have visited Earth? That's what some experts believe. These coins were found in southern Egypt. They appear to show things like UFOs and aliens. They're about the size of a US quarter. The coin appears to be a memorial to the sighting of a UFO. Some believe these coins are a sign that aliens may return to Earth soon, while others say they may simply be something else. But many historical artifacts have had UFOs feature in them before. Just take this medieval Catholic painting with a UFO in the background. Aliens showing up in ancient Egypt does seem far-fetched. But if it's not an alien, I have no idea what else this could be. Next, we have to look at these mummified crocodiles. You've heard of people being mummified before, but did you know the ancient Egyptians also mummified crocodiles? Egyptologists have found many many of these mummified crocodiles in tombs. But why did the ancient Egyptians do this? Well, the mummies were likely gifts to the crocodile gods, especially the main crocodile god named Sobek. Only rich and powerful people were mummified in ancient Egypt, so it was actually a great honor for these crocodiles to be mummified like this. They got better treatment than most humans did. Moving on, we have to look at KV5. KV5 is the largest tomb ever found in Egypt. It was found in the Valley of Kings in 1995. The tomb contained 52 of Ramses II's sons. That's right, the guy had 52 sons. Its existence had been known about for more than 100 years before it was found. Dozens of people tried to find this tomb, but they all failed. That was until one archaeologist named Kent Weeks did an expedition. He used sonar and ground-penetrating radars, and finally found the location of KV5. To this day, the tomb still hasn't been fully dug up and explored. That's because it's just so big. Moving along, we have to look at this lost ship. Thonis Heraklion used to be a big city in Egypt, but over the years, this city got lost. It had been hidden under the sea for thousands of years, with many calling it the real-life Atlantis. But amazingly, 2,000 years later, this lost city and ship was found. Divers found 700 anchors, hundreds of statues, and as many as 64 sunken ships. But the most amazing find was this lost military ship, made with ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. The ship was a massive 82 feet long and was used to defend Egypt's shoreline. Next, we have to look at these 100 lost coffins. In November of 2020, 100 lost coffins were found. These were discovered south of Cairo. Inside the coffins were mummies and 40 statues. Some of these even had golden masks. These were buried around 2,500 years ago. Many of these also had very detailed painted artwork. It's believed these coffins belong to the richest people in ancient Egypt, mainly because they're covered in gold and paintings. Next, we have to look at these secret tunnels. Did you know that inside Egyptian pyramids are many secret tunnels and doors? These are very seldom explored. Under the pyramids are many labyrinths of caves. A man named Andrew Collins found an entrance to a secret tunnel. This was via a crack in a rock in one of the tombs. This underground world is very dangerous. It could collapse at any moment, and is filled with bats and poisonous spiders. There are also many pits and holes you could fall into, which is why these tunnels are normally explored using robots with cameras. Finally, let's look at the Rosetta Stone. In 1799, Napoleon and his soldiers went to Egypt. That's when one soldier discovered a stone that would change human history forever. That was the Rosetta Stone. This black slab of stone has helped us solve many mysteries. The stone is engraved with writing, and it's a way to translate ancient hieroglyphics. It's the reason we know what hieroglyphics mean today. The writing on the Rosetta Stone is in 3 different scripts: Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic. The Greek writing said all of the passages said the same thing, which allowed researchers to find out what hieroglyphics meant. Thanks to this, we know what it says in the walls of pyramids and tombs. Today, the Rosetta Stone sits on display in the British Museum. But now it's time for you to make your voice heard. Comment below which Egyptian discovery was the most amazing. If you want to see my short videos, check out my second channel. I've been Charlie, thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.